My name is Marita, and I'll be your host today. Huge thank you to Suffolk University Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference for the second year. As you may have noticed, arriving the downtown location is a perfect hub for exploring Boston's innovation ecosystem and learning from industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston a Week is to connect the entire greater Boston area and New England community, all industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and the folks working at the conference today here are volunteering their time as well. So thank you for attending this conference, and we appreciate you playing the role in building the community with us. I'm gonna now hand the mic to our moderator, Ralph. Please take the lead. Thank you very much. Enjoy the session.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us at Startup Boston Week 2024. Today's panel is all about uncovering the magic of data and how external insights can help illuminate and drive organizational growth. So today we're excited to be joined by 3 panelists here. I'll start off things by introducing myself. My name is Ralph Majette III. I currently work as an analytics engineer for Simply Business, which is a third-party insurance company underneath the Travelers umbrella. Before that, I did some time with Pepsi as an ETL developer, and I got my start in data as a data engineer for Vistaprint. I can pass things off to Janet Eagers, as it says, CEO of an AI practitioner at Neurologistics.
Hi, Jana Eggers. I'm CEO, but don't let the title fool you. I'm actually an active practitioner of AI and have been for about 30 years. I started out working I'm a mathematician really, but I moonlight as a computer scientist and started out working with parallel computing in the late. And what you did with parallel computing then was AI, because that's what needed the most compute resources. So that's where I started, and I've just continued finding big business problems to solve, which is what I love, and that leads us to data.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Ferranto, and please forgive me. I have a bit of a cold, so I may be interrupted by comments. So I'm Senior Director of Product at Genesis. Genesis is a customer experience platform. Prior to Genesis, I've had a lot of experience working in technology companies, startups, being in a product management capacity, both as an individual contributor, but also as a product leader for both product and user experience professionals. A lot of the products that I've been responsible for have been analytics products, as well as, being an evangelist within the organization to try and bring alignment and cohesion, making sure that what we're focused on is tied to our strategic objectives. So data analysis has been a key component of that.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rob May. I've done 4 technology startups. One had a great exit, one had a okay exit, one exited, but the investor still lost money, and one crashed and burned. So I've had all the experiences you could ask for. They're all hard. They all suck. But anyway, so I'm done operating and have used my sort of angel investing experience now to raise a venture fund called Half Court Ventures. I've been doing a lot of AI investing since 2015. So that's been the focus, and it's obviously a really good time to do that at scale now.
All right, thank you. So our discussion will explore how to determine relevance and reliability of external data, integrate these insights with internal processes, use them for competitive analysis, and assess the ROI of your information efforts. By the end, you should have a couple of actionable strategies to turn external data into powerful assets for your organization. So we'll dive into 4 main questions, each addressing critical aspects of leveraging external insights. We'll also have time for your questions at the end, so get those gears turning, people. I will be putting people on the spot, just putting that out there. So let's start with the first question, and this will be directed toward you, Rob. The topic is determining the relevance and reliability of external data. So the general question is, how can startups determine the relevance and reliability of external data and intelligence?
Well, there's a couple of ways, right? There's kind of two ways that I look at external data. One is data that you can collect from external parties who are not inside your company. And if you want to talk about the reliability of data, well, collecting it yourself from people is a good way to do it. And then the second thing is, data sets that you can buy or license or scrape or whatever. The way I think about how I would tell companies to think about the ROI, it's difficult. It depends a lot on the use case. I actually just interviewed a woman for a podcast that I do called the AI Innovators Podcast. Her name is Margaret Quigley, and she buys data sets for Cohere, the big large language model company. And we had a big discussion about this because figuring out if data is good and is going to work for you is hard, right? It's a little bit of an art and a little bit of science, particularly if you're using it for AI models. Sometimes you have this problem where AI is not where engineering is, right? Like if you have a website and you're like, we got 1 million visitors a month and I need to be able to scale this to 10 million, you kind of know what you need to do. But if you have a model and you're like, oh, this model is like 88% accurate and we need to get it to like 95% accurate to make the customers happy, like, I don't know, can you do it? Maybe you need more data. Maybe you need something else, or maybe you need a totally different approach to the type of model that you're using. So it's really hard. I think it takes a lot of experience, and I think you have to constantly be out there looking at what types of data are out there, and both making guesses. It's sort of the way you make engineering estimates, and then you see how wrong you are, right? Like a lot of the reason we estimate and make plans in startups is not because we're going to get it right, but we can constantly recalibrate as we're going through the world. So that's how I would take my sort of approach to like acquiring and licensing data, or building tools to get data on your own. Margaret Quigley in the podcast actually talks about, she was at a company where they built a game to collect some data that they needed, which is kind of a cool way to get some external data. But it's definitely a challenge. And I think like constantly saying like, we think this is going to have this value, it's going to create these, whether it's better models or outcomes for our business, and then constantly looking again at, did that happen the way you predicted, is probably the best way to start to get really good at combining those art and science pieces of this.
Thank you. Just a little bit of a follow-up question, I guess, is from the startup's perspective, how can startups manage the risk of unreliable data?
That's also for me.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, that's a tough one. One thing you can do is try to triangulate stuff with other data sources. I mean, even if you look at simple data like lead gen data, trying to get somebody's email address and do they work at a company, it's hard to keep that updated. So I think your vigilance around that needs to sort of match the drift in the underlying data set, right? How much does it change? Where does it go? So, I mean, this is just another area where like you need to develop best practices and policies like you would, in anything else. And not just think of it as like, we got this one-time data dump and now we're done. Like this has to be an ongoing process of cleaning and updating and just like, staying on top of it.
Cool. And we're going to be picking on you for the first question, unless any of the other panelists would like to add anything to that.
A couple of things that I would add. One is, I'll just be transparent. So we're a small business startup, and we work with very large companies in really critical areas. So defense and intelligence is my biggest customer, and then healthcare and financial services after that. So these are people that are making major decisions. They can buy any data that they want. And that is very often the first thing that they say to us is, where can I improve this model, as Rob said, by buying data? And I generally tell them utilize the data that they own first. And the reason for that is more about that. So always think of that way. So I love the idea of people using a game that they created to gather data, because that's something that and understand where that came from. How that game was designed, all that. So I would more lean people that way than especially startups buying data. That said, where I use external data the most is for benchmarking. So there's tons of competitions that are out there that you can get the data sets for. You can see how well things performed on Kaggle and kind of say, hey, we're entering, this area, our customers are going to be asking about this. Are there any data sets out there that I can benchmark? And that's just like been great for us. And it's terrific to go into a customer and go, no, this isn't exactly what you were doing, but you kind of talked to us about this. And there's this data set. Let me just show you a quick thing that I did in 2 days. And how, can you relate to this? And so that is something that we have found with external data has been great. So those 2 little things.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, really to add on to that, to what both of you are saying, it really boils down to the reliability of the data source. So there are those external data sources. If you're trying to benchmark, there's market data. You really need to make sure maybe you have an SME or someone you trust in the industry who can help direct you to the right reliable external data sources. But then there's also going to be external data sources that you think of, like your CRM data, your marketing campaign data, making sure that you've got a reliable third party or vendor there, I think is another way to approach it as well. So external data can come from those more broad general public sources or privately purchased sources, as well as the vendors that you're going to be working closely with to help build out essentially your business and your strategic goals.
Yeah, and related to that, like understanding like how the data was acquired, like there's certain types, like I love data exhaust kinds of things you can acquire where like people are doing a thing and it's not a conscious, you're just pulling the data from the fact that they're doing it, or data that you could get like if you wanted a data set on, who's on, what companies are on, Google Apps versus like Microsoft Office 365, like you could ping their MX records, right? That's really reliable. You could do something like that automated. But if you take data, like I think people don't realize how much data is like survey data, like a lot of this like Crunch, you're like, oh, I'm going to scrape Crunchbase or use their API or whatever. You're like, how they get that data? They like nag founders. They just email you all the time. And like, sometimes I get pissed off and I tell them the wrong thing, because I'm like, stop bothering me. And so like, you don't know how well these data sets, are. And in those ones where they survey people, you have this selection bias as well, right? Like if you send me an NPS survey, I will never fill it out. I hate it. Like I'm done with your product. I don't need to tell you, like I either come back and I won't, that should be the signal. Don't ask me if I'm satisfied. So I never solve those, I never fill those out. Like the people that fill these out have a certain personality type, right? And so you're not always getting the best signal. So you got to be careful.
Thank you, guys. We can move on to the next question, and we'll start off with Vanessa for this one. How can external insights seamlessly integrate with internal processes, workflows, and decision-making structures?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you want to be mindful of are your strategic objectives. So if you're bringing data in, you want to make sure that you're understanding what information you need to be able to align to those strategic objectives, because that's really what you should be guiding everyone towards. The other things that you want to be thinking about in terms of integrating it within your internal processes is making sure that you've got accountability. So whether it's a dedicated team or you're identifying a specific person, there does need to be a focused effort behind gathering this external data and integrating it within your internal systems. So that focused effort will ensure that there is a regular process behind bringing that data in, evaluating it, analyzing it, and making it available to the rest of your business. The other thing that you want to do is ensure that you've got the right systems set up as well. So you're going to need to integrate this data in. You need to unify it with some internal data that you have. So there's processes around normalization. Data comes in different formats. So ensuring that you've got the right system set up to bring this data in, unify it, and then present it to your business in a way that's meaningful. So other systems like Power BI or Tableau that can help you kind of aggregate and visualize that data is going to be really important, so that even your non-technical members of the team are able to go and visualize that, use that, and be able to take that with them for decision-making purposes. And there's a training component to that as well. So again, if you've got your strategic objectives clearly articulated and your team is trained on how to use those tools and how to use that information, then they can take that and inform their own decision-making processes.
That's great. Rob, I've been asked if you could just push the microphone away from me just a tad. Yeah.
Okay. They told us to lean into it. So.
Does anybody else want to add before I go to a follow-up?
The one thing that I would add is, you can probably tell I wanted to be on this panel in particular because I'm very passionate about external data, because I think it's needed, especially as a startup, but it's also dangerous, especially as a startup. And by the way, this is my 7th startup. So and I've been acquired. I've gone public, mainly been acquired, and sold businesses. And anyway, so it's been insane. Startups are insane. I'll just tell you that. Lots of fun, but also insane. So, I often tell people, run your analysis without the external data and with it. So you can do that comparison and you really understand what are the decisions you're changing because of external data, because you don't know where it came from, which is what you both have brought up. And you don't know when you went in and cleaned it, you don't know if you took out the important part about it that the person who gathered it really was focused on, and they weren't focused on the other part, the fact that they've bought from us 17 times, I didn't really care about. I was really only focused on, do they like the color red? And you're just like, oh, red doesn't matter, whatever. And so there's all these kinds of things. One of the things that in software engineering, as we started making the transition to bringing in external data, I said, hey, this is totally different. We're so used to, as software engineers, dealing with data that we created, and we really knew how it was created when we pulled it in and things like that. And that's a really different thing than something that comes from the outside. You can't treat them equal. So if you can compare both of them and think about what changes, and then make the decision, what decisions that change, and then make the decision, do I really trust this data that much? And I'm not talking about external data from that perspective that was brought up here of I collected and figured out how to get this data external. I'm talking about the kind of purchased or pulled in or, whatever. And it can be even things like granularity level. So there's a lot of free data out there, but it's only available at the city level, not the, neighborhood level, something like that. And you have to purchase the neighborhood level. So think about those kinds of things, that they may not be equivalent to what you're really trying to get to. And you may be using them as a proxy. And that could be, it can be very risky in certain situations.
Yeah, actually, to add to that, you're sparking a good thought in my mind, which is creating projects or proof of concepts, prototyping things off of that is really good, because then you can go and you can test, like, am I getting the right information? Is it presenting itself in the right way? Am I able to take action based on this? So starting small, being quick, using like agile frameworks and things like that to iterate quickly, I think is really critical as part of this as well.
And we do that with our customers. Like I said, that kind of Kaggle type data or whatever, like do a quick prototype. And it may not be exactly like I did one a few weeks ago for one of my customers, and we just grabbed a remaining useful life on jet engines. That's not what they were interested in at all. But I knew the pattern. It was like a time series data and they wanted to see it. It was a small enough data set that they could understand it quickly. And then I could show them how we would work with this. So it doesn't even have to be directly relevant, but it has to be representative enough.
Anything to add to that, Rob, before I do the follow-up?
No, I think they gave great answers.
Thank you.
So, Janet, you mentioned about certain types of potential data and external insights being a little bit more of a double-edged sword, right? There's some good and some bad. Could you just talk through the audience about some potential barriers in the integration process of it, and maybe some best practices?
Yeah, we've been talking about, and Rob brought up aligning data, and that's so important that you really understand, hey, is this timing of this data the same? And you may not know that. You may think it's one thing, somebody could have changed it. How reliable is that? So it is, the risk that I was bringing up before is that's important, and really getting to know how can you verify where this came from, how it was generated, who has gone in and messed with it, because they may have gone through their own cleaning process. So I'd say the biggest barrier in integration is alignment. And so that's a big challenge for you to understand. What was the rest of the question? I'm sorry. I get distracted.
And just basically overcoming different barriers in the integration process.
Yeah, I think it's being realistic about how you can use external data. So I'll give you another example. And so one of my companies was bought by Intuit, which was fantastic. I love Intuit, and they're a small business company. So hopefully you all know about them. QuickBooks is awesome. I use it, by the way. I'm a customer. And we did follow me homes. So it sounds kind of creepy these days, but back when Scott Cook started the company, he actually would go to Staples and he would watch people, and he would do this himself too, by the way. It wasn't just team members that did. Team members did do it, but he actually really would go to Staples and he would watch someone buy it. And then as they walked out of the store, he'd go, "Hey, do you mind if I go watch you install my software?" I know, I see your face. You're like, what? I know. Hey, you get in a car with a random person. I'll just say that. We all do these days, the things we do. Anyway, so he would and literally people would follow them home. Sorry, this was with Quicken too, not QuickBooks. This is in the very early days of the company. But the company was really founded on follow me. We still call them follow me homes. FMH is how it's done. And even though we're usually going to business now and things like that, because the QuickBooks is much bigger than Quicken now, but I founded their corporate innovation lab after the company got bought, and we performed follow me homes. And so I just found some of the notes from this actually this weekend when I was cleaning out some storage stuff. And it was fascinating. We just sat down with customers and talked to them. And that's where I'd say, and this is that external data that you were talking about, like creating a game or something like that. There's customers everywhere. Don't ignore them. I think that's one of your richest sources of data is really just going to Starbucks. I mean, sit down and grab, it's not going to cost you much to buy someone coffee or get, $10, it's a lot these days, but still you get 20 of those cards and you just sit down and say, it's amazing what people will tell you. They loved it. We offered incentives when we were at Intuit. It was a free version of QuickBooks, right? About $250. You have no idea how many people are like, I don't really care. It's not even worth my time to do that. I just want you to listen to me. They want to tell you about it. So you have a lot of external data that's right there in front of you. And so that's one of the things that I would say that I think is the most unused place, whether it's automated like a game or something, or whether it's just that qualitative sitting down and really understanding what something is doing. People love to be cared about, and you're showing that you care. Now, remember, you're not there to force a solution on them. You're there to literally ask them, how do you do this? And when they say, oh my gosh, I do that this is what would happen with QuickBooks. They're like, oh, I do that every single day. That is the most important report that I ever pull. We'll ask them about something. And then they go, that is the most important report that I have. And they go, oh, cool. Can you show us how you do that? Oh, I don't know if I have the password. And then they go and get the password from someone, the report that they look at every day, remember? And then they're like, can you tell me which menu item that I choose for that? Yeah, I don't really know. And then it comes out, actually, someone prints the report out for them once a month. Those are very different things. And look what you just learned externally, right? So you're going to have someone in the survey say that it's their most important report that they've ever had in their life, and the entire company hinges on it. And then you're going to go sit with them and you're going to find out it's something that someone prints out for them once a month and they don't really even look at it.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, but I was just going to say, I'm in product, and so I hear that is the most important thing all the time. But I did want to just mention on some of the challenges or the barriers there is we've talked about it already, but just the vast amount of data is overwhelming that you have to bring in or understand and really also combine. Like, it's disparate data, right? Like, it's all these different systems. How do you unify this so that you can get a single view of what you're trying to understand? So between those two things, understanding, well, what information do I need? And I got to tell you, like, in my current role, one of the product that I oversee is customer journey analytics. And the whole idea behind it is bringing data in from all these different sources, unifying it so you get single customer timelines, you can aggregate and you can analyze all that. And it's the biggest challenge is really understanding, what data is information, or what information is important to us and our business. And every customer that comes to us is just like, here, we'll take it all and let's figure out what's important. And you almost have to come at it from the other perspective, which is, what again are those strategic objectives? What are those buyers or user goals that you're trying to meet, those business goals that you're trying to meet, and what information is going to be really important to help you understand that. Now, over time, you may begin to expand and say, well, we need this, it's not just red we're looking at, we want to look at other things. So over time, that data will expand, but you're expanding it in a meaningful way and with a purpose instead of just, throwing the noise on the table and trying to sift through it and figuring out what it is. The other part, kind of along the lines of, disparate data, is functional silos. I can't tell you how many companies I've been in where we're all looking at the same data, in air quotes there for anyone who can't see, but we're coming at it differently and getting to different conclusions. So, I've been on an operating team where I'm talking about conversion because I'm looking at a set of data from one system, and you've got the marketing head talking about conversion, which is a different number. And so now we're arguing, well, who's got the right number? So it's really important that you have cross-functional collaboration at the leadership level and then across the teams so that, one, where you're pulling the data from. Ideally, you're all agreeing to, maybe one place is better than the other, but at least you're all agreeing to the place that you're going to use as your source of truth so that you can then, again, monitor those things over time and understand reliably, are things getting better, are things getting worse? And then you've got that cross-functional collaboration where you know how to take that information and then, again, use that in your decision-making process. So those are the really big things that I've seen, is just the disparate data and those cross-functional silos really impacting the ability to be successful with the data that you're using.
The only thing I would add to that you just prompted in my mind is one of the barriers sometimes is internal politics between teams. So like one team buys some kind of data set, some other team finds out about it and they want it, and you're like, well, no, we're not paying for another license or whatever, or so you're trying to figure out the rules that you can have to copy it. Or sometimes even if you can, it's like depending on what your data architecture is and like where it lives and sits and how you access it, like they just don't want you to touch it for all kinds of various reasons because they don't have access to that system, or they're afraid you'll mess it up or whatever. So like that can be a barrier to integration too, just the internal politics of how your different teams fight over data that you have.
Thank you.
I've seen that so many times, and even data that they own. Like you have one, to your point, you have one team that like, oh, this is my supply chain data, and the marketing team wants it, and they're like, I'm not giving that to you. That's my data. And it's fascinating. It's like, no, you're under the same company, but they kind of treat internal data sometimes as external if it's not on their team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to move on to the next question. This one is, we're going to go right back to you, Jenna, actually, to start things off. In what ways can organizations use external insights for competitive analysis, benchmarking, like you mentioned before, and building a competitive advantage?
Yeah, so I do think that what I've brought up already, things like benchmarking, there's a lot of information out there. So I'd really think about how do you think about differentiating yourself? And differentiation is often, it's not just what you say. That's the easy part. It's really like, how do you prove that? And so much of that is with benchmarking. And then the other thing that I mentioned is really understanding the customer and understanding them better than someone else. So I'll give you an example of a startup that I was working with, and they were selling their product into ethics and organizations to like show how ethics, and they were like, oh, it's really hard. They're not getting a lot of funding. And so I sat there and thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, what about those companies that have government lobbyists? And I was like, they want to show that they're being ethical in a lot of different industries. So have you thought about going to a different group within the company? Because most of the ethics groups that I know about, which I support, by the way, AI, we need lots of that. But I do get that it's fraught with politics. And so like, can you turn the thinking around a little bit and think about how you can go out and validate that maybe actually going to a different group within the organization is going to get me further? And again, that's external data, right? That's going out and validating with my customer a different way of looking at what I want to offer. So I'm offering an ethics solution, but what I'm really doing is I'm offering a validation of ethics to lobbyists who can go in and say, no, we care about ethics, and here's how I'm going to prove that, right? So sometimes we need to just turn our thinking by going in and talking to different people and validating it from that perspective.
What I would add to that is, again, I'm coming at this with a little bit of a product hat on. When you're trying to differentiate yourself within the competitive landscape, it's really important to look at other tools out there that might also be providing information about your competitors. There is market research like Gartner and Forrester. G2 is a great source to kind of get a sense of what customers are saying and how the company's positioning themselves. Also, I spend a lot of time just reading the tutorial content, like the knowledge-based content of the product. So you sell yourself one way, but how do you actually deliver that is something completely different. So actually digging into what the competitors do and how their product functions will give you a sense of where they might have strengths and where you might be able to differentiate yourself with your own product. So I would take an opportunity to look into those areas as well.
Anything to add, Rob?
Nope.
No problem. We have a follow-up. So how can startups use external data to identify market opportunities? That's for anybody.
I think just a lot of what I said, I think, is where you can identify those market opportunities. So if you are looking at the competitive landscape, you're looking at the market research, you're really investigating who your competitors are, I think that's where you can begin to see how you can kind of raise yourself, so to speak, within the landscape.
I mean, if someone wants an AI answer, what nobody's built that I'm surprised is like, why wouldn't you take everything that customers say about a product category and make a bunch of embeddings around that and see where they cluster on some kind of visual map, and then make, the ways that the companies that are in that product category talk about it, and then see where the gaps are of like, you have running shoes, and some people buy them for like price and performance and comfort and style. And like, there's probably some other thing, but then the companies that do it, probably, Nike's, performance and style or whatever. And, you could probably find some white space in there where customers are talking about these attributes of a product and no company is focused on it. And like, you could automate a lot of that process. So anyway.
Yeah, actually, you're making me think of Hootsuite or other social listening tools as well. So if you can kind of tap into what people are saying in different social media platforms, you can get a sense of, how people are talking about you or talking about the competitor.
There's a bunch of people that are doing that on Amazon. They're using Amazon search data and results and building products from that. And it's much cheaper to build products now. So it's become quite an industry and a good one. Amazon can wait until it's sold and track for that. But, and that's part of the challenge, but they can go in and hyper specialize. And I can't remember, there's been a few really good examples of that that have really started from people analyzing what people were searching for, what searches weren't getting good results on Amazon.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Netflix does something similar where they look at both their internal data. So what are people watching? How long are they watching? Like, or where did they stop or, pause their shows? But then they're also looking at market trends and, viewer preferences and combining that to get a sense of what should they focus their content strategy on. And I think that's where Stranger Things came from, which was like a huge success, right? Because they used all that data. So yeah, it's a very, I think, well-known practice from that perspective of being able to really look at what's happening in the market, what are people saying, what are they doing, and then applying that to your strategy.
But so I will say one of the things you have to think about if you're using a lot of external data, though, is, in certain categories like recommendations, it can have this homogenization effect across, users. And your Netflix comment made me think about it because I read this book, Filter World, recently. And so last year, across all Netflix movies, there were like 4,800 different movies streamed, right? And the whole idea behind the internet is this kind of stuff is going to give us the long tail. It's going to give us more options. At its prime, a Blockbuster Superstore carried 6,000 titles. So you actually had more selection pre the online world because there's so many recommendation engines and things that drive it. The guy that wrote the book wrote this article you might have seen called "Why Do All the Independent Coffee Shops Look the Same?" Because they're Instagrammable. You see it on Instagram. You make your coffee shop look that way. You're now in London, even though you're a New Yorker, and you're like, "Oh, this coffee shop looks like a place in New York." So it's like, so you do have to be careful about using external data to put it in the context of like, is everybody using it, and does that make me not stand out? And like, it can homogenize consumer options or preferences. And so I would encourage you to read Filter World if you haven't. It's a good book.
I love that point. And it goes along with one of the things that I always talk to startups about is, I think of quant research as being bookends, like start with some quant to really understand what the lay of the land is. And I don't mean like you're paying for that. I mean, like, just go out and read the studies and collect what you can and be scrappy and all that stuff. Then do the qualitative. And that's really like understanding the customer. And that's hard work. And it's a lot to do. But it's where you get the richness, to your point about, is it really because, people really like white coffee shops, like it's bright and open, like I'm thinking a Tate or something like that, or are they looking for, or do we have too many? You just walk around and wow, there's now 17 of those, and it's like people are going to break. I mean, think about when Starbucks went out, everybody was like, oh, we got to be like Starbucks with the big cushy chairs, and that's all changed. Starbucks has changed. And so like really understanding the timing there, because I think that's a big thing. Like you could get in and beat the filter bubble, if you will. But are you? And that's one of the things to question. So
yeah, it actually brings up the point about you're constantly going to need to stay ahead of these market changes and these dynamics, and customer expectations are constantly evolving. And so, it's not I think you had mentioned, it's not like a one-time data dump and walk away. You need to have some dedicated focus on that, a dedicated effort around constantly monitoring, managing, and understanding the data.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our final question, and then we'll open it up to you folks to ask your questions. So for this one, how can businesses assess the return of ROI of their information harvesting efforts? And Rob, if you could just start us off.
I mean, it's something we look at when we invest, is what kind of data sets, particularly for companies doing AI related things, which is most companies these days, like what kind of data sets do they have access to? What do they have that might be proprietary or interesting? What do they have that might be there's this concept of data network effects where, one data set you have when augmented with another data set, the original data set becomes much more valuable. They're really hard to find. I haven't seen too many places that actually have those, but, we look for things like that. And, I think a lot about the marginal, how will the marginal value of additional data impact this company, right? Do they need to continually get lots more of it, and it's expensive, but it's increasingly less valuable to the product, but they have to do it for, certain reasons, product expectations. I mean, my last company, we ran into this issue. So we built machine learning models that ingest your style guides or brand guidelines for marketers. And then we built machine learning models off that. So if you were using generative AI to create content, we could make sure that content was on brand. And what you found was like the minutia that people wanted you to keep checking for, smaller and smaller and smaller things, just became like increasingly difficult to build models around. And you had to get labeled data sets that were really hard to get, of like, Intel was like, yeah, all our stuff has like this random blue line that goes through the middle and it has to look like this. And we're like, oh man. So, we do think a lot about this. I think it's hard for companies to, unless it's a standard core part of your product, I think it's hard sometimes to guess what the what the ROI might be. Like if you're looking at, expanding this to this will help us expand into a new customer segment or augment the product in this way. But again, I'll go back to what I said on my first answer to the first question, which was, I think you need to have processes and procedures in place that make estimates about this stuff, and then constantly check yourself against that. So you're getting better and you're learning where you're off and where your biases are.
Anybody else? Anything to add?
That was an awesome answer.
Mhm.
That was an awesome answer. So I'll just go into a quick follow-up and then we'll open it up for you guys. So what are some KPIs that external data efforts are delivering the value? And that's for Rob, if you want to take that, or we can open it up to the panel.
Somebody else want to try? You guys have probably seen more KPIs on this than I have.
Key performance indicators, if anybody's not familiar with the acronym.
I would have done a bad job on the ROI question. Because there's so much, as a small business, KPIs are hard. It's more like you're surviving every day. And it's like the KPI is I survived. Yay. So, not that of course, I talk to my board about KPIs, but it doesn't hit me every day. I think it's, so I don't have a good answer for small businesses, for startups. We deal with that every day with our customers, and like I can show them. So I should have mentioned before. So our AI platform is explainable, and that's why people buy. The explainability allows them to get better answers because they can see which data had an impact and like what they might be missing and all that. That really makes is this data performing much easier because we can see how much impact it had. So I have those customers stuff all the time, but these are big customers. I mean, this is, giant. And so for a startup, I think sometimes we'll get a little bit too wrapped up in KPIs, and I'm not saying they aren't important. They definitely are, because that gives you your direction, and make sure that you're in, but you should check your KPIs too. Am I just biased towards this direction, and why do I have it? And what is it really getting me? And so I don't know. That was a really lame
maybe the right
answer.
KPI for an external data set is, did we actually end up using it? Right? Like that's the one you need.
That's
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, if we're thinking about just general KPIs for your business, I think tie yourself to what your objective is. Are you trying to drive growth in customers, growth in revenue? Are you trying to maximize profit? Are you trying to reduce costs? Like, what are you actually driving towards? And then from there, figure out, well, what are the metrics that can help understand, like, are we doing well? So if you're trying to drive just sales growth, well, number of customers over a period of time. If you put a target out there, 10 or 15 or whatever it is by the end of your quarter or your year, how do you get information about the number of customers? Use your CRM data, right? Like, how many customers are you closing in that? And just track that on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, however it's important to you. If you're trying to drive, again, profit, you need to get some sense of cost. So what are your cost components in your business against what are your revenue components in your business, and make sure that you're gathering that data for it. So I think kind of the point would be, you don't have to have this, smorgasbord, so to speak, of every possible metric to ever understand. It's really focus on maybe 3 to 5 key numbers that really help you understand what you're driving towards, and if you're successful in driving towards those.
Thank you. So I told you I would put you guys on the spot, right? So we are going to open it up to the audience for questions. We have about 10 minutes maybe to do this. So gentlemen, you right there, right up front, you were first.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that insightful panel. My name is Shazab Lada. I am the founder for Forte Investment Fund. My question, or rather reflection, is on the balancing act that one must drive so that you don't lose the differentiation and also don't get overwhelmed with everything that's external data brings, and qualitative data from clients and what you're hearing versus quantitative data through transactions that you're seeing, and driving that balance, right? And being very choiceful of what you're actually going to measure. I think, Vanessa, you talked about, being choiceful of the metrics they're going to pick, right? Any kind of, from your experiences in terms of things to be wary about, careful about as far as that balance is concerned?
I'll tell you. So I always, on a regular basis, show my teams when I manage, AI teams or anything like this. The website, I think it's called like spurious correlations or something like that, and it's all about like weird things you find in big data sets. So there's one where it maps like number of Nicolas Cage movies in a year to number of children who died in a swimming pool, and it's like a perfect match, right? And you're like, there's no way those are correlated. But it's something you have to be careful about. I don't know like a good technical way to do it, but it's one of those things where like culturally you have to build a culture of like constantly saying like, is this real? Like, does this even make sense? Right? People have to like, we all want to be data driven, but then sometimes you don't want to be like just stupid by the data, right? Because you found some spurious correlation. So you have to constantly reinforce that people need to question things and ask if it makes sense. So I kind of have it a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you one quick example, and this is from the olden days of the internet. So harken back to before we had smartphones. And this is a company got bought by Intuit, and it was called apps.com. And we were the verbs of the web instead of the nouns. So back in those days, people were just starting to do online applications. And our vision was not that we were the Yahoo of directory. We actually wanted to interlink all of the applications so that you could have an HR over here, and application over here, and your accounting over here, and supply chain over here, and you could actually have those working together even if they were from different companies. Now you may understand why Intuit bought us. We became Intuit's developers network. But we were general. We were for consumers too, and mainly because we wanted the attention. We wanted people to start, we wanted to learn about how people were using applications. So in that case, we did have some excitement around, oh wow, look how many people are using this and they're going, but we had to be very careful about what data we looked at, like how many people are going to the business type applications versus just applications in general. And we didn't want to narrow it too much because we still wanted to have some information there about how people were interacting with the web, if you will. And so I think that's a case of one of those of, not to get distracted by something that, being in USA Today and having all these people come to us, but, they were looking at how do I smash a pie in someone's face, right? That, not really, but just online. And so it's really learning from that kind of thing, like what percentage of people are coming and looking at business applications? How does that link in? How does it mention in USA Today differ from Fast Company of the time? So it's those kinds of things that we would look at really specifically to kind of understand what are we actually learning from data, even though all the data was things that we collected.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Sir, right there.
Thanks for the panel. And I had a question more based on wondering if you guys have any experience or any insight into open source or maybe open core data acquisition, because right now I'm managing a repository on GitHub and we just got 12K stars. So we're in the top 2,000 out of 28 million public repos. And what it does is essentially it's an open source job application automation software, and we're thinking about turning it into a product or freemium model. And my question is the best strategy, say, when you develop a freemium model, to have users just opt in to enter your data pool, or are there other methods that might be worth exploring that?
I mean, I think if your value is in the data pool, like you need people to opt in, I think you make them opt out if they're using the free version, right? And sort of have them in by default. I think the thing that's important when you're building out a freemium model is people often charge for the wrong things. They want to charge for like the core basic functionality. That's not how you make money in freemium, right? You give away the core value prop and then you charge for all the bells and whistles when people complain about like, oh, it should do this fancy thing. And it's like 2% of your population wants that and 3% wants this. And that all adds up to like 20% that when you add those features and you charge for it, you get that freemium conversion rate. So But yeah, I would make people opt out if that's what you need, right? If the core data set and people opting in is not part of your value, then I would let people opt in, and I would play up the fact that like we don't use your data. I think that's a good marketing strategy in this day and age. If you don't need it, everybody's data to be like, it's private, it's private, it's private, it's private.
Okay, and one or two more. We only got 10 more minutes. Ma'am?
So for Jana, please, where do you get the blouse with the keyboard on it?
Sadly, that is an Italian designer that doesn't specialize in tech. And I got it in Vail at a boutique that went out of business during COVID. But I used to go out there for a conference every year, and I would always get fun things from them. But yeah, it's hard to get. Sorry.
To keep us on to keep us on topic, we can add a couple more. Sir in the corner, I'm sorry, with the white shirt, I've been messing you a couple times.
I just checked the correlation website. It said Will Smith movies and power generation in Kosovo is correlational. But my question was nothing to do with. It's been a lot of technical discussion, and I understand many of your founders here. I just wanted to know one or two anecdotes from each of you as to what is the hardest part about having started, exited, and one or two principles that we can keep in mind as an early stage startup. Just.
We have 5 minutes.
What's not hard about it? The thing that sucks about doing a startup is when it's not working, it feels terrible and it's hard and you're not motivated and you don't know what to do next and you're just trying stuff. And when it is working, you're growing too fast. Other people don't believe. People like things are breaking, and then you hire people and they complain that it's not like it was at their other place. Like it's just the whole thing is just like really, really, really hard. It's a lot of fun and really satisfying, when it works out. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like I think you just have to like really love the fight. I think that's why I did it, the rest of the time. Like it's why I'm not going back and doing it. It's like I've kind of lost that, right? Like I don't have the stomach for it anymore. You got to be the kind of person that you're like, when your biggest customer cancels, you're like, this just motivates me more to, double down. Like I'm gonna make twice as many calls today, and like do whatever you're gonna do. And like, I'm too old for that now.
I would say that a lot of people start a business thinking, oh, I'm going to be the boss and I'm going to do everything, that everybody else screwed up. And you're the boss of nothing. Everyone is the boss of you. Your employees, because they're so critical to you, it's hard to lose any of them. And you get scared of that. Your board hates you, your investors, because they want more. They don't hate you. I shouldn't say that. I love my board, but your investors are cranky because, they're every single one of their other startups, every single one, right? Like exited, with a 100x, and you're the only one lagging behind. I'm like, I'm the only one still alive, motherfuckers. Yeah. Sorry.
Truth is, if you exit it all for like 1x, you're a unicorn, right? Yeah. Like, that's a real number.
So they've learned now. But really, it's hard. You are the boss of very few things except your passion. And that's what keeps you going. And I really all the time think of that. Last night I was watching Stacey Abrams talk, and she said something about what gets you up in the morning. I was like, I am passionate about explainability in AI. And it just made me realize I'm in the right place, because I really believe AI needs to give us more, and we should expect more from it. And so I'm in the right business for me. And that's what keeps me passionate. That's why I can keep going despite all of that.
Vanessa, you want to close this out?
I have not founded a company, so my experience is very limited. But I have been a part of a number of startups that have exited. And I will say, just from that perspective, it's very challenging, to be really invested emotionally, even as, an employee on the team. If you see it small and grow to that exit stage, to kind of let go in many ways to what you were a part of, the team dynamic that you were a part of. I mean, you were talking about like how things change, like especially upon an exit and being acquired. That's a whole nother world. And so I would say that has always been a challenge. A happy event, but also a challenge.
Okay. And that will wrap up the panel. As your moderator, let me thank my panelists. Thank you guys so much for giving us your time, your wisdom, your insights. And I would encourage everybody to reach out to these individuals, not only in person, but their LinkedIn official. Trust me, I was in every one of their DMs prior to this. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, dear panelists and attendees, for attending this session. We have a welcome party presented by HPE tonight at 6 p.m. So please stay and enjoy the party with us. The next session that is happening in this room is called To Hoard or to Harvest, Navigating the Decision to Build Your Data Warehouse or Sell Your Insights. So if this is not what you are looking for, then you should go to the registration room and they will help you find the correct room for you. Virtual folks, please just stay wherever you are and you'll see the next session. And lastly, I just want to say that there are a lot of incredible perks that our partners and sponsors of Startup Boston Week are offering you, and everything from free co-working space to legal hours and much more. So to take advantage of that, follow the URL that is located on the table at the back of the room. Thank you very much. See you on the next session.